Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Snack and Learn webinar. Just mentioning the housekeeping items briefly. The presentation slides are available to download in the handout box, along with a paper as a PDF, the paper that this presentation is based on. You can find the handout box on the GoToWebinar control panel. And there will be time for question and answers. Please ask questions in the question box, and we will refer to them at the end of the presentation. So thank you, and I will hand it over to Daniel to start the presentation.
Thank you, Sharon. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today. So today's webinar is on the topic From Data to Decisions. My name is Daniel Cannizzo, and I'm an Associate Principal in the Strategic Asset Management team in Australia. Today, I'd like to share a process-focused case study that will provide you with some insight into the methodology and approach to major transformation projects involving asset data. How often have you found yourself with an abundance of data and wondering how you can translate this into useful information for your organisation? How can you combine it with people's learned experiences and knowledge to enhance decision making? But before we jump into it, we'll run through the agenda for today's presentation and hear just a bit about myself and the Australian Strategic Asset Management, SAM team, as we're known. The following is a list of the key topics that I'll be covering off during today's presentation. We'll start with the introduction to the case study, then elaborate on the specifics of the approach, and we'll finish with some questions from the audience. A bit about me. I have a mechanical engineering background in heavy industries, including steel manufacturing, mining, power generation and defence. I'm based in the city of Newcastle, which is in the state of New South Wales in Australia. And in fact, I'm quite fortunate working in Newcastle because we have all those heavy industries mentioned located in very close proximity to the city. The SAM team, however, is spread out all around Australia with staff located in basically all the state capital cities, including Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Sydney, etc. As a team, we help our clients achieve their business objectives through the whole asset lifecycle at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels of the organisation. And to do this, we regularly work collaboratively with other disciplines within the WSP business, including digital, change management, business analysts, and the whole spectrum of engineering, of course, for instance, design, environmental, reliability engineering, etc. We provide diverse strategic asset management advisory guidance and services to all kinds of industries around the country, which is particularly relevant, I think, because although we're only talking today about one specific project in one sector, the problems and approach are consistent for most businesses and industries. For this project in particular, I was involved in a few capacities over the duration, including as project manager. I also wrote the asset information strategy and was involved in steering the direction of the data cleansing exercise and also helping to form up dashboards that displayed useful asset information to aid in decision making. Having lots of data is not good enough. You need the right data and it needs to be supported by a robust information framework. I'm sure most of you are already aware of the significant presence of digital solutions to our asset management problems. But while software can provide significant benefits, to truly get the most out of them, there needs to be a line of questioning to determine whether it is really fit for purpose for your business. WSP led a significant data transformation project with a major Australian port. Being a seaport, the client owns and operates numerous assets with the purpose of transporting goods between ships, road and rail. As you can see on the right of this slide, the port manages diverse assets, including wharves, channels, large mechanical machines, navigation aids, roads and rail, vessels, and other typical heavy industry assets like utilities and services, buildings and fixed structures, plant and equipment. Our client was looking to be more aligned with the ISO 55000 suite of standards and to uplift their asset management capability. We had previously undertaken an asset management maturity assessment as step one. In doing so, it determined that a concerted program to transform their asset data management would provide the greatest upfront benefit and lay the necessary foundation for continual asset management improvement. As an asset-intensive organisation, our client needed to transform how they collected, stored, and used their asset data. Asset data should ultimately reside in a single repository in what is known in the industry as an enterprise asset management system. The system is often referred to as an EAM system, which is the acronym. The EAM system allows for all asset data to be kept in one location and system, which should help the business more seamlessly manage and use the data. The purpose of this project was for WSP to support and execute a targeted program to improve their EAM system. So a bit about the project in a bit more detail. The project actually spanned 3 years between 2020 and 2022. As you can see, it started with WSP undertaking a maturity assessment and subsequently providing an improvement roadmap with next steps. Once approval for the next steps was received in 2021, WSP undertook the data transformation scope, along with some supporting tasks concurrently, including developing their asset information strategy and their asset risk framework. Leading into 2022, we essentially continued to build on the activities from the prior year. But the focus of discussion today is the data transformation scope. As you can see in the flowchart on the right of this slide, the overarching approach we took was first reviewing the existing EAM software solution, then determining asset information requirements, followed by developing and improving the data on the integrated EAM system, and finally establishing and identifying future activities that can be taken on for continual improvement going forward. Overall, the purpose was to deliver a targeted and structured program to facilitate an asset management maturity uplift and provide sustainable benefits to managing their assets. Some organisations may want to invest in new digital solutions. Sometimes they already own a solution that they can adapt to be more fit for purpose. The port was unique in that they already had a system in use that, if used to its full potential, would have been able to fulfill the needs of the business. But to ensure that this was really the case, we engaged in a comprehensive gap analysis that assessed the port's existing asset information system against industry standards. In this process, we asked key questions, such as those shown on the right of this slide. What does the organisation currently have in terms of data and systems? What exactly are the business requirements of the organisation? Is the system meeting them? And what kind of improvement actions and activities would be needed to close the gap? These types of questions guide people into thinking about whether their existing digital solutions are suitable or if they need to go to market to invest in a new one. Identifying business requirements was key to this process because you need to know exactly what you want out of the system before you decide what goes in. During the gap analysis, we uncovered some challenges the port was facing in relation to their asset information systems, including 1, poor quality asset data and configuration governance. And when we say poor quality, this included data that was not up to date, missing data, or even in some cases, duplicated entries for a single asset. Sometimes the knowledge of assets was sitting with the individuals, but not the organisation, and there was no consolidated view of the current asset portfolio. Because this information was not fully available, it had the potential to bring significant risks to the business. 2, another challenge was having disparate asset data sources and siloed business divisions. This appears to be common for many organisations, where different functions have their own way of managing data and use bespoke systems for their operations. However, not having a consolidated asset database means the business is unable to prioritise investments by not having a full understanding of all their assets. Additionally, it prevents knowledge share and the realisation of business synergies. 3, in this case, while the port's EAM system did have the capabilities to achieve their asset information requirements, it was not being fully utilised as a business as usual activity. This system had mapping functionalities and could store attributes such as asset condition, risk, age, and replacement costs. However, the use of these attribute fields was not consistent across all business divisions. 4, finally, resourcing constraints was also a pain point. Migration onto a digital platform or even just consolidating all the data the port owns requires tremendous effort and time. This is especially made difficult where you can't stop the business operations and need to run BAU activities concurrently. But this was all in the discovery phase. But once we knew where the problems were and the current state, we needed to define some requirements. A fundamental of asset management is having an objectives-based approach to the activities and programs being conducted. As a result, even before inputting data into the EAM system, it was critical to identify what were the asset information requirements of the business. We needed to make sure they were aligned with asset management objectives and the broader strategic objectives of the port. Of course, this meant collaborating closely with the leadership teams and operational teams that would be directly interacting with the system. As shown on the right of this slide, rather on the whole of this slide, these are some of the information requirements we identified. Firstly, the port wanted a better understanding of their assets, to have the transparency and visibility of their business risks. Which assets are in particularly poor condition? Are their assets about to reach their end of life? Is there a major asset that needs to be decommissioned? With the visibility over their entire asset portfolio, they wanted it to help inform and enhance business decision-making. By having real data, real evidence, the port would be able to strongly justify their investment priorities, know when they should do refresh programs, asset replacements, or to divert resources. Better decisions are also accompanied by more accurate asset lifecycle costing. Having a consolidated view, especially one that provides you with information about asset costs, is extremely powerful information to an organisation. While most of the time you're aware of the value of your assets, knowing the overall maintenance costs and when they're able to reach their end of life would allow the business to engage in long-term planning. Finally, all of this will help you identify future opportunities for your business that will ultimately drive better asset performance and better achievement of your strategic objectives. By integrating and consolidating your data sets, you can transform this into business intelligence that benefits all parts of your business. The information requirements then guided the program in establishing some key asset attributes that would be able to provide the information the business needed. Due to the limited time frame and resourcing constraints, it was important to pinpoint which pieces of data would be the most useful and impactful across all asset classes. Crucially, you can't and shouldn't aim to collect every piece of information under the sun. It's too onerous, not just to collect it first time, but to maintain that data accuracy over time. Every organisation is constrained in time and resources, so prioritise what's important. This slide shows the specific data attributes that we aim to collect for all assets. For example, we wanted to make sure assets were named clearly and logically, having photos attached where possible to allow for easier identification. The assets were also mapped via a GIS coordinate. Thus, it gave the port a visual and spatial understanding of their asset portfolio. Knowing the asset condition, age, and expected useful life can then be translated into information that drives business decisions. This is the kind of data you would need to inform major capital projects or simply to understand where the greatest risks are. And of course, knowing the number of assets owned, how much it costs to replace and maintain, and when they're expected to bear the cost would improve asset lifecycle costing. This would eventually feed into the modelling and forecasting of future business investment and expenditure. Now, of course, you can collect additional alternative data attributes for specific asset classes as necessary. For example, for electrical assets, you might collect power rating data, and for wharves, you might collect material of construction, steel, timber, concrete, so on and so forth. But it's important, once again, not to boil the ocean on data capture, because the data has to be maintained enduringly. Having identified both the asset information requirements and the key data sets needed, we could now dig into the actual sourcing of this data. The dedicated data transformation program aimed to integrate and consolidate data sets across the organisation to provide a single source of truth for asset information. The process outlined here, from left to right, is what we followed for each asset class, with the asset classes deemed most important to the port undertaken first. Firstly, we had an initial stakeholder engagement with the asset class owners. This allowed us to understand what information was available on the current EAM system and where other information was stored. Throughout all this, there was also a component of understanding what the end users would like to see out of the program and what in the EAM system would help with their operations. Secondly, we began the data cleansing phase. This meant going into the system and looking at what there was, validating the accuracy of this data, and performing the data consolidation. With the information provided to us by the asset class owners and consistent communication with these individuals, we could make sure the EAM system reflected what may have previously been stored on a spreadsheet, for example. Thirdly, to close out the cleanup of each asset class, we circled back to the relevant stakeholders to have them review and verify the inputted data. Finally, because this program was constrained by time, we made sure to clearly identify where there may still be knowledge gaps. This would inform the future works for continual improvement and asset data maturity uplift. Now let's dig a little deeper into the data cleansing exercise, which took the most resources and effort. The aim here is to work within the integrated EAM system to uplift the quality of asset data. Again, just having a lot of data is not enough. We needed to make sure it was the right data. The 7 points on this slide illustrate the tasks involved. This exercise looked to draw knowledge from stakeholders to input into the system and verify information already on the system with external data sources, such as spreadsheets, drawings, OEM manuals, and inspection reports. We consolidated all the various data sets into the EAM system, filling out the key attributes where we could. Because there wasn't previously strong governance of how data in the EAM system was managed, we discovered that assets were sometimes duplicated. In this step, we made sure to identify these, verify them, and then remove these duplicates. The most challenging component of this step was probably needing to understand and capture all the different ways asset data was previously captured. Sometimes, especially for older assets that are common to ports, information was just altogether unavailable. But this type of data uplift program is not meant to be a single project. It's a continual cycle of improving the quality of your asset information. We made sure to reflect this in the system by having a validation tracking field that indicated how accurate the asset data was. The intention was that with the continual revisiting of these assets, this validation tracking field would be updated to eventually provide the most up-to-date and accurate version of the asset information. Finally, we looked to identify where there were remaining gaps that could not be filled with desktop information. Often this was as easy as taking a photo of the asset and or finding the supplier attributes on the nameplate. As we were also restricted by COVID-19, this was flagged as gaps that could be verified on site as the port undertook future site inspections. Now, a data cleansing exercise cannot be undertaken alone. There needs to be supporting activities to make sure the use of the EAM system would be sustainable. The 4 boxes on this slide demonstrate some of those supporting activities. Along with our client, we collaborated with the EAM system provider to determine the capabilities of their system that would help meet the port's information requirements. For example, we were able to inquire more about how the system worked to model degradation curves, ultimately providing the organisation with capabilities in asset life modelling. The various steps of engaging with the stakeholders not only provided a space for them to share what they know, but also to bring greater awareness to the system capabilities and in knowing their assets better. The EAM system provided a one-stop shop to knowing what information the port owned. This constant engagement was also particularly important since the program was being run in conjunction to BAU activities. Where there was new information emerging, such as new assets being acquired, this engagement provided the opportunity to adapt what data was collected and how it can be fed into the system directly. Leadership buy-in was also critical. The benefits of an EAM system flows throughout all levels of the organisation, but having that leadership endorsement will ensure its success and sustained usage. We also worked with our clients to begin development of a dedicated asset risk framework and asset information strategy. Both these artifacts supported the transformation of data to information for decision-making and ensure the necessary risk management and governance frameworks were available for the long-term use of the EAM system. Through this program, First off, the port was able to establish a consolidated asset register on the EAM system that encapsulated all their various asset classes. Assets were named and clearly labelled, with photos attached and mapped through their GIS coordinates. Being able to visually see where your assets were and have that context instead of just a line of numbers really brings to life your organisation and its assets. Next, having information about the asset condition, age, value, and location also enabled the piloting of a dashboard that gives leadership a clear, easy to understand overview of their port's assets. Through this, you could see which asset classes presented the greatest risks, maybe due to their asset condition or age, and the estimated replacement values and when they may need to be replaced. Refer, for example, these two dashboard images on the right. Where the first image, we can see the count of assets in each quarter of their life cycle. The fourth quarter in red shows the assets in the last quarter of their life. We can then, for argument's sake, drill down by clicking onto that quarter to see a list of, or a whole list of those assets in the last quarter of their life. And then in the second image, we can see the average asset condition, perhaps for each asset class if you want to, and then drill down on the assets in poor condition, again in red. Taking it a step further, we could then, for argument's sake, drill down on both filters simultaneously to see the oldest and poorest condition assets, which are effectively the riskiest assets to the business. This is where dashboards can be very powerful to draw insights from the raw data. With the healthy data and comprehensive data, they now have a blueprint to conduct asset lifecycle costing to inform their long-term capital maintenance programs. Most importantly, with the right asset information to know where your business risks lie and where opportunities may emerge. This case study today focuses mostly on the process and thinking behind the data transformation program at one organisation. However, this approach can be deployed across all sectors and industries. While some amazing asset management digital solutions are available, organisations should be guided by the specific information requirements to identify what is more suitable for them. By supporting our client with specific activities to guide the development of the integrated EAM system, we are able to facilitate an uplift in the asset management capabilities. This involves firstly understanding what your current system provides and what your requirements are, and establishing a dedicated program to transform your data and identifying where the future opportunities lie for continual improvement. With an EAM system that is suitable for the organisation, fit for purpose and driven by organisational information requirements, it's able to support better asset performance, optimise costs, and more effective overall asset management practices. We at WSP, along with our clients, endeavour to continue on this journey to improve quality of asset data to drive better decisions. And that about wraps it up, Sharon. Thank you for everyone's attention. We'll now open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Daniel. Fantastic presentation. I want to mention briefly the housekeeping items. The presentation slides are available to download in the handout box along with a paper which this presentation is based on. And also please continue to log your questions in the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel. I will start with the first question. How should you prioritize the scheduling of projects? Is it by severity of need or repair priority or network route assignment?
Yeah, okay. Well, essentially for all organizations, a business should have a decision-making framework. In that decision-making framework document, it should define, I suppose, the priorities that the business weights more importantly. And that should help the business ultimately prioritize all projects or maintenance activities. And typically that is always a balance between a careful balance between cost, risk, and performance, as we know as asset management practitioners. So although every business is different in how they should prioritize, I would say following the guidelines in that decision-making framework document is the starting point for any business.
Thank you. What is the single biggest challenge that owners face in implementing asset management?
Well, that's quite a broad question. Um, Everything. No, but I suppose from my experience, I would say the single biggest challenge is probably a lack of resources. As I mentioned earlier in this presentation, resources and time is something that all businesses are limited by, and a lack of resourcing within the business is a huge roadblock to getting more proactive asset management activities done. And we see that with the need to have business units come together and work collaboratively towards asset management goals. That can only happen if there's adequate available time and resources within a business to allow them to come together and work together. So lack of resourcing, and I suppose that's somewhere where myself and our team in WSP are able to assist, because we're essentially extra bodies to help with that journey, that asset management journey.
Thank you. The next question is regarding data contracts. What is the business case for data contracts, and how can we help clients see the value in procuring them?
Okay. Data contracts. I imagine this question is regarding outsourcing capability to assist with whether data mining, data manipulation, management of the data. I would say, generally speaking, as we've learned today, a business needs to be extracting value out of their asset information. If they're not extracting value out of their asset information, then they obviously need to be improving the way that they acquire, manage, and store the data. All of those things that we talked about that need to be defined in the asset information strategy. So coming back to my earlier point, if a business doesn't have the capability or capacity or resources in-house to do all those activities, then they should consider outsourcing the data management, and that will help progress that endeavor.
Thank you. Do you have any advice for when non-data engineers come across large amount of data, what to do basically?
Yeah, that's it's a great question, because as we were touched on today in this presentation, that is actually a huge problem for all organizations. There seems to be an abundance of data that's collected, and that takes time and effort, but maybe it's too much or too overwhelming. I guess my response to that would be, and not everyone's a data engineer. I'm not, for instance, my background is a mechanical engineer. My first recommendation would probably be to verify that all of the data is actually required by the organization. Because if you can reduce the data burden, that will ultimately make life easier, especially initially. There's lots of ways I can answer this question. I would say that there's obviously smart programs and codes and things that you can use to process and filter what data you do end up with, and you can bring in specialists on the topic, subject matter experts to assist if it's a certain aspect that you need more help with. For instance, we often lean on our WSP digital team because they have some really smart people on their team to help manipulate data in really smart, cool ways. And so we work collaboratively with them as well.
Thank you. I will take the last question. What was the name of the EAM software system used in this project?
Yeah, good question. Look, there is a lot of different software solutions out there. For this project, it's confidential, so I won't reveal the software name, but just to say that this process is, as you can see, tool agnostic. It doesn't matter what software is out there. It's a process that should be followed with any EAM software solution, and there's lots out there. So we can help with any software that any business uses, I suppose, is probably the key takeaway.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel, for a fantastic presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Sorry for the early hour in Australia. Please feel free to follow up directly with Daniel via the contact details shown on the screen. And again, thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you all.